Hey family, it's your girl, Boss B, and welcome to the Ask a Bee Show, the place where your letters come to life. Every day people write in with real questions about life, love, and everything in between. And together we find hope, healing, and a whole lot of honesty. Because here on Ask a Bee, we don't just talk about problems, we talk about possibilities. So grab your tea, open your heart, and let's buzz into today's letters right here on the Ask a Bee Show. Hello, how are you today? I'm doing great. Welcome back to BBTV's Jukebox Journey. It's Friday, guys. We got Jukebox Journey today. Listen, this is a show where we're not just going to talk music. We're going to follow the lineage, okay? Because that's the fun part. The fingerprints, the echoes, you guys. The voices that shape entire generations, right? Today's episode is a reminder that music is never created in a vacuum. No, it's passed down like a torch, carried from one voice to the next, sometimes quietly, sometimes explosively, but always undeniably, right? Now, as we trace the roots today, you're going to see how one spark from the 1960s ends up lighting a fire after fire after fire across decades, right? Continents and genres. Because today's chain is not random, it's intentional. It's about influence and stagecraft, grit and rebellion, and, that magic quality that can't be taught, only felt. So, we're starting today with Mick Jagger. Can't help it. I got to love my Mick Jagger, right? The blueprint of swagger, attitude, and electric frontmanship, if that's even a word. I doubt it, but it was. Mick isn't just a singer, okay? He invented an entirely new vocabulary of movement on stage, right? And when we follow the ripple effect of a performer like that, guys, we find something almost alchemical, right? Every artist who ever came after him had to decide, consciously or not, whether they were going to tame the fire, borrow the fire, or build their own. Now, one artist who understood that choice, deeply was David Bowie, right? Hey, I love my unique, okay? Bowie didn't borrow from flames. Mm-mm. He redesigned the match that lit those flames. When Bowie exploded into the glam era, he didn't just, shift rock. He stretched its borders. Suddenly, it wasn't enough to stand center stage and sing. Now you have to have a character, Ziggy, right? A universe, a whole world around your music. And here's the beautiful jump you don't always see on the surface. Bowie and Mick weren't just colleagues or collaborators. They were mirrors of each other, pushing each other further, stranger, louder, more fearless, right? And that fearlessness, the unapologetic reinvention, is the exact crossroads where Cher stepped into their chain. Cher is the definition of reinvention, right? Reinvention without apology, reinvention without losing the core of her voice. She took the theatrical groundwork Bowie laid, blended it with humor, vulnerability, fashion, and emotional storytelling, right? And built a career that spans not just decades, but entire eras of pop culture. When you talk about powerhouses, okay, you can't bring up Cher without bowing your head respectfully to the woman whose voice became a foundation stone for, well, damn near everybody who came after her, okay? Miss Darlene Love. Yes, baby, yes. Darlene Love is one of those rare artists whose influence is totally woven into the DNA of modern music, whether people realize it or not. Her work shaped vocal power, harmony structures, the rise of girl groups, and the entire wall of sound era. And for every artist like Cher who came after, Darlene was part of that roadmap and part backbone. And if you're following this chain, the way we build them here, there's one direction that becomes absolutely inevitable. Okay. The raw working class soul meets rock storytelling that leads straight into Mr. Bruce Springsteen. Yeah, baby. Bruce brought something new to the table. Not glam, not spectacle, not even reinvention, but heart and grit. Lots of that, you know? The poetry of the working man. He was probably the poet laureate for there. He carved his legacy, absolute honesty, and stage energy that felt like a revival and a confession at the same time, right? And like all great leaders, one of his greatest impacts, it wasn't just on audiences, but on the artist in his own house. Which leads us to the final link in today's chain, his brother in arms, the legendary Steven Van Zandt. You can't go anywhere without this man, right? He was an artist. He is, pardon me, an artist whose fingerprints are all over the American rock activism, songwriting, and the beating heart of the E Street Band. Now, today's chain isn't just a list of artists, okay? That's not what we do here. We put the work in. It's a story of evolution, swagger to art, art to reinvention, reinvention to foundation, and foundation to heart. And guess what? Heart to legacy. So buckle up, because today we're going to travel through 6 eras of music history to understand exactly how one voice inspires the next. And don't worry, it all ties in to the Ask B show. Now, when you talk about the architecture of modern rock performance, you have to begin with the man who built the blueprint brick by brick. Okay? You have to. There's just no way around it. Mick Jagger, baby. Before Mick, the stage was a place musicians occupied. After Mick, the stage became a place artists commanded. Okay. In the early days of the Rolling Stones, he wasn't just testing boundaries. He was erasing them and then, totally rewriting them. And it wasn't calculated. It was instinctual. Mick moved like someone who understood the primal truth that music, when done right, doesn't stay politely inside your ears. It climbs inside your chest. It rattles around and forces your body to answer back. And the thing about Mick is this. He wasn't content with being another British singer in a crowded 1960s explosion of bands. He didn't want to blend in with the Beatles, the Kinks, the Who, or, hey, the Yardbirds. Remember that one? Excuse me. He wanted to stand apart. And most artists do, right? His secret was this, just his voice. And I guess his looks too. I mean, he was a handsome man, still is. It was the ability to break the unspoken rules of performance. He wasn't soft. He wasn't symmetrical. He wasn't polished, and he was wild, unpredictable, agile, and untamed. But when Mick took the stage, he didn't walk out. He arrived. He arrived on that stage. Listen, he made every venue feel like it was too small to contain him. And maybe it was, even when it was a huge stadium. So look at early Stones footage, okay? The hair swinging, the shoulders rolling, the elbows jutting out in angles that should make sense somehow, but don't. But the lips curling into a half sneer, half smile. At that time, nobody was doing that. Nobody was brave enough to do that. He wasn't just dancing. He was translating the song into physical language. Still to this day, at his age, he does all these wonderful movements. And This is why he's this age, I think. Audiences, especially young fans who never, ever seen anything but, stiff television performances, looked up and said, oh, so that's what rock and roll looks like. Right on. Mick didn't invent rebellion, okay? But he sure as hell gave it some shape. What people forget about Mick is that his genius isn't limited to swagger. He's a deliberate, intelligent craftsman, okay? His stage persona may look chaotic, but every single move is rooted in character mastery, the way a method actor builds a role. Except Mick never stops rewriting the script, not even now. One night, he's the seductive devil. Woofty. The next, he's the manic puppet master, pulling audience energy like strings, right? Then he's the wounded poet, the restless preacher, the carnival ringleader. The man is a walking anthology of personas, okay? And yet, somehow, all of them undeniably Mick. Mick's influence, it wasn't just on the Stones catalog, okay? It radiated outwards like shockwaves. When he blended blues, soul, and rock attitude, he created a template for what a front man could be. Artists across continents watched him and realized they didn't have to be cute or clean or traditional to make people feel something. They just had to be truthful. So simple. And Mick's truth was movement, raw emotion, and a refusal to apologize for his existence. He didn't stand in the center of the stage waiting for permission. He claimed it. He strutted across that stage, kicked it wide open, and rewrote the rules for every generation that followed. By the late 60s and the early 70s, I believe, young artists were studying Mick the way apprentices study master craftsmen. David Bowie used to sit and watch Rolling Stones performances frame by frame, not because he wanted to copy Mick, but because he wanted to understand that fearlessness and what it looked like. And, what it was when it was given a microphone, what it would look like then. It wasn't the hair or the clothes. It was the ownership. Absolutely, the ownership. It was the freedom to look odd, move strangely, break symmetry, and still captivate millions. Look, Mick Jagger taught a whole world of young musicians that charisma wasn't about perfection. It was about conviction. Absolutely. There's a lot of things out there like that, I think. Pardon me. And as the Stones evolved, okay, Mick's persona evolved with them. The rebellion of the early blues era, it morphed into the swagger of the Gimme Shelter years. Then into the glitter-dipped flamboyance of the 70s, and eventually the polished, athletic, high-stamina icon of, the stadium tours. The man reinvented stage endurance. Hi, Plus Sister. Good to see you, honey. Oh, gosh. So the man reinvented stage endurance, not presence, endurance, right? He turned concerts into marathons. He trained like an athlete before athletes trained like athletes. And through it all, he kept that same mischievous fire, the spark that made teenage fans swoon and rock legends take notes. I mean, I'm one of those fans. I can't help it. He's a pretty man. So Mick Jagger didn't just shape rock, okay? He set the bar for what a front man must be. Absolutely. And the next artist in our chain didn't just take that inspiration from Mick. He expanded the entire playing field. Bowie didn't just follow Mick. He collided with him. challenged him, and in doing so, pushed both of them into a new era of performance art. And that partnership, that energy, oh my gosh, that creative friction is where the journey gets electric. Because when you talk about boundary pushing, theatrical transformation, and artistic boldness, you can't talk about Mick without sliding right into the gravity of David Bowie. And their story isn't just two artists crossing paths, it's two forces meeting at the height of their powers. So, there are moments in music history where two forces don't just meet, they just absolutely collide headfirst. And when Mick Jagger and David Bowie stepped into each other's orbit, it was not accidental, it was inevitable. Mick represented raw kinetic energy. Bowie represented shape-shifting cosmic imagination. One was earth and the other fire, and the other was stardust and theater. Okay? But the magic wasn't in their differences. It was in the way they recognized something familiar inside of each other, long before the rest of the world even caught on. Their relationship, it started as admiration, evolved into inspiration, and eventually it turned into one of the most fascinating artistic friendships the industry had ever seen. Somewhere in the 60s London scene, in smoky clubs, backstage corridors, studios, that were just filled with people that look prehistoric to us now. But Bowie was the young, starry-eyed observer watching Mick Jagger rewrite the rules of frontmanship in real time. Bowie wasn't just watching for entertainment, though. He was studying, absorbing, and quietly building something of his own. He saw Mick's confidence. That was his favorite part of Mick, okay? Still is to this day. That serpentine movement, the way he commanded attention without begging for it. And Bowie began shaping his own brand of disruption. And that's what it was. And you know what? You can't have rock and roll music without a little bit of disruption. So, what's beautiful about their dynamic is, okay, Bowie didn't copy Mick. He refracted him. He took Mick's boldness and sent it through a prism of theater, fashion, space age storytelling, and character performance. And here's the twist. Mick saw that. Mick saw Bowie walk on stage as Ziggy Stardust for the first time and recognized the same kind of boundary breaking he himself had ignited years earlier. It wasn't a threat. It was exciting. Mick was excited. Pardon me. It was like watching a student take a foundation that the teacher laid in front of them and build something wild and avant-garde, and on top of it, absolutely on top of it. By the time the mid-70s rolled around, they weren't just peers, okay? They were creative accelerants for each other. One's a match, the other one's lighter fluid, and it all became the flame. They spent time together socially, musically, personally, often hanging out until dawn, talking about art and rebellion and fame and identity and what music could become if they kept pushing the edges. And their studios were only miles apart. Yeah. Their imaginations, they were right next door. And every time they were together, there was this spark, okay? Something playful. Sometimes it was competitive, but it was always electric. That pushed each of them further into creative evolution. Bowie inspired Mick to embrace theatrically more elaborate stagings, more daring visuals. Mick inspired Bowie to embrace groove and swagger and the looseness of rock and roll. And then there's the moment that the world remembers, even if they don't know the entire story. Dancing in the Street. One of my favorites, y'all. Can't help it. That video wasn't planned 6 months in advance with a market strategy or anything like that. No. That chaotic, joyful, ridiculous, wonderful moment was born from the purest kind of artistic chemistry. Okay. Two icons, two legends at the height of their powers, just wanting to have fun for a charity project. And they created one of the most memorable crossovers in pop culture history. The dancing, the stomping, the bright outfits, the unhinged energy. That video wasn't trying to be perfect, okay? It was trying to be alive. And that's exactly what Mick and Bowie brought out of each other. Absolutely. Now, what people rarely talk about is how deeply they respected each other as artists. Their public collaboration was fun, but privately, they had real conversations about how fame shapes a person, how reinvention is necessary to survive, and how music can only evolve when artists dare each other to be bolder. There has to be a level of competition there. And it doesn't have to be rival competition, it can be friends, you know? They understood the weight of their influence and not in an arrogant way, but in a knowing way. They knew they were changing the culture, each in their own direction, and they were watching each other do it. And yeah, they were both proud of each other. Mick sharpened Bowie's edges. Bowie expanded Mick's horizons. And in that push pull dynamic, rock and pop both leveled up every artist, every single one. Now, so like every artist who came after, from glam rockers to pop icons to stadium performers, inherited something from the Jagger Bowie exchange. Their friendship was a bridge between swagger and space, between street grit and stardust, between primal performance and theatrical storytelling. And if Mick and Bowie together are a cosmic collision, then David Bowie on his own is an entire universe, because David Bowie didn't just change music, he changed identity itself. And that's where we're heading next. So, David Bowie wasn't just a musician, right? He was a living, breathing constellation. When Bowie stepped into the industry, he didn't arrive like a traditional rock star. Okay, he arrived like a question. What if music could be theater? What if identity could be fluid? And, what if sound could look like something and looks could sound like something? From the very beginning, Bowie refused to stay inside the box. No boundaries. That the record labels, audiences and other musicians unconsciously accepted. Where others were building careers, Bowie was building worlds. Kind of like the Iron Sharpening Iron show is now not just the Iron Sharpening Iron show. At the beginning of the year, it will be the Iron Sharpening Iron universe. And here I am, a galaxy in that universe. I'm feeling it. Very, very proud of it. Now listen. To understand that Bowie, you have to understand, or to understand Bowie, you have to understand his fearlessness. Reinvention wasn't his strategy. It was his nature. The folk influenced early years, the psychedelic experiments, the moment Ziggy Stardust emerged in platform boots and orange hair like a visitor from another galaxy, Bowie made audiences realize that music didn't have to mirror everyday life. It could leap beyond it. He didn't just introduce Ziggy. He inhabited him. He blurred the line between character and artist in a way no one had dared before. And he did it unapologetically. Suddenly, rock wasn't just about guitars and rebellion. It was about identity and performance and transformation and most of all storytelling. And while the world was trying to catch its breath from Ziggy, Bowie shed him without hesitation. Just gone. That's the part people underestimate, though. Bowie walked away from his most successful persona at its peak because he refused to become trapped by his own creation. Let that one stew for a second, okay? He moved into Aladdin Sane, the Halloween Jack, then the Thin White Duke. Each era with its own visual language, musical palette, vocal approach, and emotional temperature. No one else in rock history has shifted shapes with the level of intentional artistry. Okay? He didn't evolve because the industry changed. He evolved because he refused to stagnate. At the heart of Bowie's genius was his ability to fuse genres like a mad scientist. Glam rock, soul, funk, electric, art, pop, industrial. He absorbed influences from everywhere and recombined them into something uniquely his. One year he was performing. The next he was covering Alabama soul songs, with a London twist. And the next he was inventing electro pop. I mean, wow. Electro pop. And alongside Brian Eno in Berlin, Bowie wasn't following trends. He was outpacing them by years. Here's where Bowie ties back into the thread of tonight's chain, though, or today's chain. Pardon me. I'm ready for bed. Okay. While Mick Jagger represented the physicality and the raw electricity of rock, Bowie represented its imagination, its potential to be more than audio. But they weren't opposites. They were complementary forces. Mick showed artists how to break free from stiffness. Bowie showed them how to break free from themselves. If Mick liberated bodies, Bowie liberated identities. But the heart of Bowie's story is not just his persona, right? It's the emotional truth underneath them. Yes, he was theatrical and cosmic and fantastical, but Bowie's songs were always rooted in vulnerability, loneliness, longing, transformation, self-discovery, alienation, survival, and hope. He wrote emotional reality into surreal worlds. He made people who felt different or felt, something else. He made them feel seen. He gave permission to every future artist who didn't fit into a neat mold to, embrace that difference instead of hiding it. And even when Bowie was reinventing himself every few years, hey, the industry watched him with quiet understanding. Wherever Bowie went, the future wasn't far behind. His collaborations, from Iggy Pop to Freddie Mercury to Nile Rodgers, they weren't creative partnerships. They weren't just creative partnerships. They were cultural detonations. Bowie had an uncanny, and I need a drink. Pardon me. Y'all, I talk too much. You hear me? Okay. Bowie had an uncanny ability to step into a room, hear something no one else heard yet, and elevate it into something iconic. And when he eventually connected more openly with Cher in the orbit of the 70s and early 80s, music, television, and award circuits, that meeting wasn't random. It was the convergence of two titans of reinvention. So that's where we're going to go next. Okay. To the intersection where Bowie's theatrical evolution meets Cher's unstoppable unstoppable reinvention because Bowie and Cher didn't just share a stage, they shared a vision of artistry that just it refused to stand still. So there are collaborations that feel planned, marketed, and structured. And then there are moments that feel like, I don't know, the universe simply decided to put two legends on the same stage at the same time. The meeting of David Bowie and Cher belongs in that second category, I think. It wasn't just two icons performing a medley, it was two fully formed artistic worlds brushing up against each other and sparking a moment that still glows almost 50 years later. Now, to really understand why this duet hit the way that it did, you have to picture 1975 clearly. I was only 3 years old, so let's do that together. Bowie had just come through the shockwave of the Ziggy era, stepped into young Americans, okay, and was shaping the future of pop soul long before the industry even had a word for that, okay? Meanwhile, Cher was ruling television, fashion, live performance all at once, and she had survived being labeled, boxed in, doubted, over or underestimated. And, she reinvented herself so many times, the public could barely keep up. Bowie was redefining what a man could be on stage. And Cher, she was redefining what a woman could survive in the industry. By the time that they met, they were both titanium in different shapes. Their chemistry, it worked because two shapeshifters recognized each other's insanity. Seriously. Bowie walked onto Cher's stage already aware that she wasn't just a singer or a personality. She was an empire. She walked out knowing she wasn't sharing her spotlight with a guest. She was sharing it with a comet. Not 3i, I promise. Okay, Niecy, love you, honey. So they approached each other like two performers who understood that authenticity doesn't always look like the same, Sometimes it's theatrical, sometimes it's glamorous, sometimes it's alien, and sometimes it's grounded. But when it's real, the audience feels it. When they performed that Young Americans medley together, it wasn't just a duet, it was cultural alchemy. Bowie's voice, drenched in soul and edges, okay, wrapped around Cher's powerful, clean, commanding tone in a way that no one expected. Their vocal blend shouldn't have worked on paper. Bowie was stylistically jagged, okay, emotional, slightly off center by design. Cher was precision, warmth, and control. And yet, when they opened their mouths at the same time, the entire arrangement clicked like two puzzle pieces that were cut decades apart, but somehow fit. What people did forget is that Bowie came onto Cher's stage not as a glam rock alien persona, but as a man in a transitional phase, stepping away from Ziggy, stepping towards the thin white Duke, and digging into a deeper soul influence. Cher caught him at the perfect midpoint where he was both grounded and unguarded. And because Cher's stage was a variety format, part glamour, part humor, part spectacle, Bowie got to show a version of himself that wasn't always visible in his solo work. He laughed more. He leaned into the warmth of the moment. He softened without losing his artistic edge. And Cher, in turn, embraced Bowie's theatrically in a way that allowed her to kind of tap into a more dramatic, conceptual version of him. Pardon me, not the comedic television star, not the folk pop survivor, excuse me, and not the ballet queen, but the woman who could, stand next to a shapeshifter and hold her own. She didn't just match him, she met him. Okay. Something very few artists ever did. When they locked eyes mid performance, it wasn't flirtation, it was recognition. Bowie saw someone whose resilience matched his reinvention. Cher saw someone whose imagination matched her courage. That performance gave audiences a glimpse into an alternate timeline, a parallel universe where Cher and Bowie might have collaborated more, recorded together, toured together, or, hey, they could have created a conceptual project. They were that compatible, that surprising, okay, that equal in energy. And even though it was just one television moment, it had the impact of a full era. Culturally, the ripple effects were huge. After their duet, Cher leaned more heavily into high concept staging, bold costumes, dramatic visual arcs, during her later TV specials and tours. Bowie, after stepping into Cher's warm, audience-centric environment, carried a sense of accessibility into some of his subsequent public appearances. They influenced each other, okay, in small but meaningful ways, not by merging their styles, but by absorbing each other's confidence. And here's the part that fans rarely talk about. Their duet wasn't supposed to be iconic. It wasn't marketed as a groundbreaking event. It was simply two stars agreeing to merge set lists for a night, But sometimes the most lasting artistic moments come from the interactions that aren't overproduced, the ones that happen naturally, sparked by genuine chemistry, mutual respect, and the kind of unspoken understanding that only two lifelong reinventors can share. So when Bowie and Cher stood on that stage, they didn't just create a moment, they created a shared legacy, a reminder that music history is built on collisions, the kind that, they leave a glow on everything they touch, right? And if Bowie showed the world how to become a new version of yourself, yeah, Cher showed the world how to do it again and again without ever losing your center. So now we move into the next arc, Cher on her own, a masterclass in longevity, reinvention, and fire. People, listen. Oh my goodness. If there is one artist in this entire chain whose life looks less like a career and more like a myth, it's Cher. But the thing about Cher's myth is that it wasn't handed to her. She built it piece by piece, era by era, reinvention by reinvention. What Bowie explored in persona and theater, Cher explored in endurance and transformation. And endurance is a different kind of power, a power that belongs to someone who refuses to be erased. Now let's go back to the beginning, because Cher's rise was anything but predictable. She didn't come from the privilege or a neatly arranged industry pipeline. She came from grit, from a home where money was scarce, opportunities were conditional, and dreams were considered. Dreams were considered luxuries. When she connected with Sonny Bono, she wasn't handed fame on a silver platter. Okay. She built it with him. She built it through long nights in tiny clubs, through rehearsals that seemed endless, through harmonies that were, I don't know, tighter than their budgets, And when I Got You, Babe hit the world, it wasn't just a song. It was a declaration that an unconventional woman with an unconventional voice could rewrite the rules of pop music. Cher's voice has always been her secret weapon. Deep, smoky, resonant, the opposite of what the industry considers marketable for, young women in the 60s. But instead of softening herself to fit the mold, y'all, Cher leaned into the anomaly. She embraced the tone that set her apart. She made her voice her signature, the way that Jagger made his movement his. And that choice to embrace the thing critics said made her unsuitable became the backbone of every victory that followed. When the 70s, when the 70s rolled around, that era that tried its hardest to swallow her whole, it just didn't work. Variety shows, cultural shifts, personal upheaval. Most artists would have fizzled out under the pressure of being overexposed and underestimated at the same time. But Cher is built differently. She turned the variety format into a weapon. She became a visual phenomenon. Costumes, comedy, choreography, stage storytelling. No one had ever seen a woman use television to build a musical empire the way Cher did. And Bowie used the stage as a canvas. Cher used the camera, and she dominated it. But what truly sets Cher apart, I think, is her resilience. We talk about that a lot here in the Iron Sharpening Iron universe. Every time the industry told her she was done, she came back swinging. After leaving Sunny, critics said she'd fade. She didn't. After disco faded, they said she'd fade. She didn't. After turning 40, they said her audience would disappear. Instead, she reinvented herself again and launched some of the most iconic era music videos of her life. When most artists worry about aging out, Cher aged up. She walked into the rock arena looking like a goddess who had lived, loved, lost, survived, and she sang like she had nothing left to fear. Let me tell you, then came the turn that changed everything, okay? If I could turn back time, that black bodysuit, the battleship, that moment when she fully embraced the power of being a grown woman who didn't owe any modesty, apology, or permission, the backlash came. Of course it did. But the backlash only proved how much she terrified people who weren't ready for a woman to own her image that boldly. And let me tell you something, Cher, in true Cher fashion, she laughed at him. She simply said, "This is who I am, deal with it." That moment became a cultural reset. But the masterstroke, the one that cemented her status as the queen of reinvention, was belief. At a time when radio was shifting towards younger, slicker pop, Cher walked in with a sound that nobody had ever heard before. Auto-tune wasn't new, but the way she used it was revolutionary. Cher didn't adopt technology, okay? She harnessed it. She took something experimental and turned it into a global anthem. That single didn't just revive her career, okay? It reshaped modern pop. It influenced every producer for the next decade, okay? EDM, electric pop, dance pop, vocal modulation. You can draw a direct line right back to Cher. But Cher's greatness isn't just in her music. Okay. Not even in her acting, not her style either, really. It's in her ability to remain absolutely unmistakably herself through heartbreak and divorce and abandonment and betrayal, death, reinvention, and reinvention again. She held onto her core: bravery, humor, commitment, instinct, and a steel spine hidden beneath major charisma. She doesn't chase trends, okay? She defines them. She doesn't follow eras. She outlives them. And she has done it without ever pretending to be perfect, polite, or predictable. So, what people admire most about Cher isn't her fame, it isn't even her survival. It's the fact that she shined through all of it, no matter what. That's dedication, right? Her refusal to let the world tell her who she was or is, her ability to stand in a male dominated industry and say, I'll tell you who I am. Women in entertainment owe her more than just credit, okay? They owe her freedom, the freedom to reinvent, the freedom to age publicly, and the freedom to be loud and bold and glamorous, dramatic, unapologetic, okay? Cher made it possible for women to have more than one artistic life. She made it possible for them to have 10. She did. She did it herself, right? How many think she's had now? Yeah. And that brings us to our next turn in our chain, because no matter how powerful Cher's own story is, it's built on the foundation laid by the women who came before her, just like all of us. And one of the most important voices of those voices, one of the pillars that shaped the resonance, power, emotional clarity that Cher embodies. Yes, my girl, Miss Darlene Love. Okay. Now, pardon me. I feel like she was one of the most important of those voices, one of the pillars that shaped the resonance, power, and emotional clarity that Cher embodies. I believe it. And the woman who would echo in Cher's own evolution. Okay. She's also the woman whose story proves that greatness doesn't always show up on the charts. Sometimes it shows up in the bones of the music itself. So now we step into the powerhouse at a root of it all, the legendary Darlene Love. If Cher is the queen of reinvention, then Darlene Love is the cathedral those reinventions were built inside. And the wildest part about her whole story is that for decades, the world didn't even realize they were listening to her. They didn't. She is the definition of an unsung hero, literally. Only she actually sang. And except for her voice was so powerful and so unforgettable, so soul shaking, that even without the spotlight, she shaped the sound of an entire generation. Darlene Love didn't just sing notes. She constructed emotion. Every syllable, every swell, every bit of vibrato carried a kind of grounded power most artists spend their whole lives trying to fake. Long before anyone called her a legend, long before documentaries and Rock Hall inductions and standing ovations, okay? Darlene's voice was already the backbone of 60s. The voice you heard soaring above the strings, the harmonies you felt in your chest, the emotional punch that made records completely timeless. That was her. Even if you didn't know her name yet, you felt her. You did. Let's talk about the wall of sound era. Okay. Because this is where Darlene becomes unavoidable in music history. Phil Spector may have been credited with the sound, but Darlene was the heart inside it. Her vocals were the engine of the Blossoms, the fuel behind the Crystals' biggest hits, and the emotional anchor of countless tracks that sold millions, yet didn't give her the rightful credit. Never. They never did. Her range wasn't just about notes, it was about emotional storytelling. She sang with a depth that felt older than her years. Okay. Pardon me. Heavier than the pop packaging she was placed in. And when Darlene sang, you didn't just hear a song, you heard a life. And that's what's so important, especially in a chain like today's, is understanding that Darlene's influence, it didn't just echo through the 60s and stop, okay? Oh my gosh, my mouth is so dry. Her vocal style, her power, her phrasing, her emotional depth became the blueprint for generations of singers. It did. Every powerhouse vocalist, every diva, every belter, every singer who leads with soul and strength owes something to Darlene Love. Whitney, Celine, Aretha. In her pop moments, Tina, Cher, Mariah, and every modern vocalist who pushes from the diaphragm with emotional truth. They're touching the foundation that Darlene Love built. And look, it wasn't just her sound that made her iconic. It was her resilience, because Darlene faced something that it was the men in her era rarely had to. She faced erasure. Her voice, it was used, but her name was never lifted. Her talent was celebrated privately, but her credit was withheld publicly. She saw songs she recorded go out under other group names. She experienced the gut punch of knowing that her work was everywhere except on paper. But here's the thing about Darlene Love. She didn't stop. She didn't quit. She didn't let that industry injustice define her. She stayed in the ring long enough to outlive the lies. So when the 70s and 80s rolled around, Darlene did what only the strongest do. She pivoted, reinvented. She took her talent to Broadway. She took it to film. She took it to television. She even took it to live performance careers, that never slowed. Even when the charts forgot, she made yearly appearances on David Letterman that became tradition, not just performances. Every December, audiences didn't feel like the holidays had started until Darlene sang Christmas, Baby Please Come Home. That is the kind of cultural impact you can't manufacture. That is emotional imprint. And I think that's where Cher's connection came into play. Cher, a woman who mastered reinvention, drew from the emotional tradition that Darlene helped create. The grounded vocal approach, the deep resonance, the ability to handle heartbreak in the chest voice without cracking. Cher didn't imitate Darlene. She inherited her influence. They lived in different lanes, but they shared a vocal lineage. Without Darlene's generation laying the emotional groundwork, Cher's evolution would have had a different texture. So let's go deeper into Darlene's power, because this is not just historical, it's spiritual. There are artists you listen to because they sound good, right? And then there are artists you listen to because something in their voice, it just feels like it connects you to the truth. Darlene belongs in that second category. She carries gospel in her phrasing, R&B in her rhythm, rock in her grit, and let me tell you, pop in her precision. No genre could contain her, and no era could diminish her. She is one of the rare artists whose sound didn't age, it traveled. It moved with the times because it was built on emotion, not a trend. And in that resilience, in that ability to move through decades without bending to what the industry demanded, Darlene becomes the perfect bridge to Bruce Springsteen. Okay. And he is the next link in our chain because, like Darlene, Bruce isn't an artist. Okay. He's not an artist. I'm sorry, he is an artist. He's not an artist built on gimmicks. He's an artist built on truth and grit, stories, heart. And the respect between the two is not coincidental. It's generational. Bruce grew up listening to voices like hers. Voices that carried the weight of working class struggle and the hope of something better. Voices that didn't just perform, they testified. And when Bruce built the E Street sound, when he leaned into that gospel influence, when he wrote with a voice that felt like it belonged to everyday people, he was drawing from the lineage Darlene's generation established. So that brings us to the next one. Bruce Springsteen, the poet of the working man and the natural continuation of emotional lineage Darlene Love helped create. So when Darlene Love and Bruce Springsteen's world finally crossed in a meaningful way, it wasn't just a coincidence. Everything happens for a reason anyway, but this was not a coincidence. It was random, or it wasn't random. It was destiny. At least that's how I see it. The natural merging of two power traditions in American music, epic. Absolutely epic. Oh, okay. So, my goodness, I'm already done with my hour and I still got. Okay, we're good. So, on one side, you had Darlene, the voice that carried the emotional architecture of the 60s. And on the other hand, you had Bruce, the poet who translated the grit of the working class into anthems. When those energies met, they didn't collide, they harmonized. Okay. Bruce grew up on voices like Darlene's, that gospel rooted emotional truth that didn't just sing lyrics, but lived them. Okay. Even before he ever met her, she was part of his artistic DNA. The woman of the 50s and the 60s, the girl groups, the gospel powerhouses, the R&B queens, they shaped the emotional landscape that Bruce would later bring into rock. So when Bruce says Darlene Love is one of the greatest voices to ever walk the earth, it's not flattery. It's acknowledgement, okay? It's respect from a man who understands the shoulders he stands on. Now, Darlene Love understood Bruce Springsteen long before they shared a stage. She recognized the honesty in his voice. She recognized the storytelling where she carried emotion, through power and vibrato. Bruce carried it through poetry and rawness. Their styles were different, but their intentions were identical: to bring truth to a microphone, to make audiences feel something that couldn't be fake. When Bruce began producing Darlene's 1992 comeback album, Soul Survivor, the synergy was immediate. Bruce didn't approach the project as a star helping a veteran. He approached it as a student honoring a teacher. He understood that Darlene Loves didn't need him to elevate her. She was already one of the greatest of all times. What she needed was amplification. She needed the industry to be reminded of the powerhouse it had tried to overshadow. And Bruce gave her that reminder that by doing something simple and profound, he stepped aside and let her voice lead. That's all he had to do. The studio sessions between Bruce, Steven Van Zandt, and Darlene were legendary for one reason. They didn't feel like a comeback. They felt like a coronation. Bruce and Steven built arrangements that wrapped around Darlene's voice the way a cathedral wraps around a choir. Supportive, expansive, and reverent. They weren't trying to modernize her, okay? They weren't trying to compress her into the trends of the early 90s. They treated her like she was a giant, and she was a voice that deserved center stage, a woman whose story needed to be told properly and for the first time. And when Darlene Love sang in those sessions, it was like hearing time itself stretch. The voice that carried the 60s roared into the 90s without losing a single ounce of power. Bruce has talked openly about the chills he felt in the booth, about how Darlene didn't just hit notes, she released them. They flew out of her with a lifetime behind them, a lifetime of being uncredited, underestimated, and underpaid. A lifetime of fighting to reclaim her own story. In that studio, she wasn't reclaiming anything. She was resetting the record. This partnership, it became a full circle moment for both artists. For Darlene, it was a validation. For Bruce, it was a connection and a bridge between the artist who influenced him and the legacy he was building. He understood that the musical world he lived in existed because of Darlene's generation, and he made sure the world remembered that. Now, there's the live chemistry, okay? Watching Darlene Love and Bruce Springsteen on stage together is like watching two branches of the same musical tree grow towards each other until they touch. Bruce brings the storytelling, the sweat, the heart, the blue-collar poetry. Darlene, she brings the fire, the gospel, the lift, the emotional electricity. Together, they create a sound that feels like both a celebration and a revival. When they lock into harmony, it's not two voices blending. It's two eras shaking hands. Absolutely shaking hands. And Bruce has said many times that Darlene Love is one of the greatest people he's ever worked with. Not because of fame, not because of flash, but because she embodied the authenticity Bruce spent his entire life chasing. And Darlene, she saw Bruce not just as a rock star, but as someone who carried the old traditions forward with respect. A woman who never forgot where music came from. A man who paid homage to the giants he admired. The beauty of their connection is that it doesn't feel forced. It feels ancestral. It feels like two artists who were always meant to meet, always meant to collaborate, always meant to bring out the best in each other. Their partnership is one of those rare cross-generational unions that feels holy. The kind of artistic relationship that reminds you music is lineage, not a moment. So that brings us to the next giant in this chain, the man whose entire career stands out on the foundation of emotional trust, sweat, storytelling, and stagecraft, Bruce Springsteen on his own. Now, Bruce Springsteen, pardon me, I need a drink again. Okay, so Bruce Springsteen is one of the rare artists who didn't just build a career, okay? He built an American mythology. He really did. And not the kind of not the kind built on superheroes or, glossy fantasies. Bruce built a mythology out of real people, factory workers, dreamers, loners, sitting on porches at 3 a.m., lovers in borrowed cars. I mean, kids with more hope than money, right? Parents with more responsibility than sleep. He sang about lives that weren't polished enough for television, polished enough for magazines, or even polished enough for record label fantasies. And he made them sacred. Now, to understand Bruce, you have to understand the place he came from. New Jersey wasn't glamorous in the era he grew up in. It wasn't the polished pop culture version people later joked about. It was grit, concrete, broken streetlights, dinners that never closed, or diners that never closed. Sorry. I'm sorry. I'm trying to get through this silly thing. Okay. Y'all, it is dry in Texas today. So, yeah. Now, Bruce internalized that whole world, okay? He didn't dream of escaping it. He dreamed of giving it a voice. He dreamed of turning the everyday lives of the people he grew up with into something worthy of being sung or sung. I'm starting to lose my voice too, so it's a good thing tomorrow is Sunday. From the moment Bruce stepped into the industry, he was different. Record labels wanted rock stars with flash and excess and scandal. Bruce gave them none of that. He showed up in jeans, in a t-shirt, with notebooks full of lyrics that read like short stories. He didn't write songs. He wrote cinematic vignettes. He didn't chase sensation. He chased truth. His voice it's not traditionally polished. It's cracked. It's rasped. It's struggled. But that was the point. Bruce didn't hide the strain. He let the strain be the emotion. Then came Born to Run, the album that didn't just establish Bruce Springsteen as an artist, okay? It established him as a storyteller of epic proportions. That record sounded like freedom and frustration and youth and rebellion, hope, danger, and escape all at once. It wasn't just music. It was a movement. And Bruce wrote songs like someone who was running for his life and taking the entire working class with him. Every single song felt like the climax of a movie. Every single lyric felt like the page of a novel. And, you never forget. And yet, even as Bruce hit fame, he didn't become distant. He didn't become untouchable. Bruce stayed rooted in the very people he wrote about. While the industry tried to paint him as a rock god, he kept showing up as a man. Flawed, honest, searching, evolving. He sang about America, not as a flawless dream, okay, but as a complicated home. He didn't sugarcoat anything. He didn't pretend life was perfect. He showed the bruises, the bills, the heartbreaks, the small victories, the tired mornings, and the desperate prayers. And those really sacred, ordinary moments. By the time, though, the river dropped, Bruce had become something no one else was at that time. A chronicler of, I hope I said that right. I'm trying to say that right. Of ordinary life. The way that Darlene Love carried emotional truth through vocal power, Bruce carried emotional truth through storytelling. He wrote the verses people lived. He captured the things they felt, but didn't have the words for, they just didn't know what to say about it. And he turned those everyday struggles into something kind of holy. Then came the era that showed the world Bruce was more than a poet. He was a mirror. Born in the USA, it became one of the most misunderstood hits in music history. People heard the chorus and tried to turn it into a patriotic chant, but Bruce's verses told a different story. The story of a veteran who returned home and wasn't greeted with celebration, but with abandonment. That was Bruce's brilliance. He took the American dream and peeled it back until you saw the truth underneath. And through all of this, the fame, the misinterpretations, the global tours, Bruce stayed loyal to the thing that grounded him, and that was community. The E Street Band, it wasn't just a band, it was a family, a community, a tribe, a living, breathing machine powered by loyalty, sweat, and chemistry. Now, every member mattered, everyone. Every friendship was real. Bruce built a musical world where every person on stage had a purpose, a personality, a role in the story. And the heart of the world, there was something deeper than fame, and it's called brotherhood. Now, that brotherhood is what connects him so deeply to Darlene Love. Okay. Both of them built careers, not on celebrity, but on realness, on truth, on standing in front of a microphone and giving everything they had, whether the room held 10 people or 10,000. Bruce admired Darlene because she embodied the raw emotion he built his career on. And Darlene, she admired Bruce because he carried torchlight, okay, for artists like her. Artists who weren't always given the credit they earned. But here's the key to understanding Bruce Springsteen. He never stopped evolving, still to this day, even as he's aged, even as he's gained recognition, and even as he became a cultural icon. Bruce continued asking questions. Who am I? Where do I come from? What can music still do? What can art still heal? And instead of running from the vulnerability, he embraced it. He wrote openly about depression, about doubt, about fatherhood and loss and love, and about resilience. Now, Bruce, his late career work is some of his richest because it kind of strips away the myth and shows the real man, as far as I'm concerned. That's just my opinion. But that honesty is what makes Bruce one of the most beloved performers in the world, too. When he steps on stage, whether at 25 or 75, he delivers like he's got something to prove. He sings like the lyrics still matter, and they do for a lot of people. You can't tell me there's not a person out there that doesn't hear Springsteen come on the radio and feel that nostalgia. So, he plays like someone who knows music saved him. His shows run 3 to 4 hours because he isn't performing for the audience. He's performing with them. He's pulling them into his story. He's giving them a night where they're seen and heard and they feel alive and connected. So this is what makes Bruce, I think, the perfect link in today's chain. Mick gave us swagger. Bowie gave us transformation. Cher gave us reinvention. Darlene gave us emotional foundation. Bruce gives us the human heart. Unfiltered, unedited, unashamed. And standing right beside Bruce through nearly the entire arc of his career. And I promise you guys, this is the last one, but I had to get them all in here, right? The man who shaped the sound, the band, the activism, and the career, or the soul of E Street, is the next giant in our chain. And yes, my friends, that is Steven Van Zandt. I mean, you can't watch Bruce Springsteen and not see Steven, right? There are partnerships in music, okay? And then there are bonds that become legend. Bonds that, they don't just shape a sound, but define an entire era. Bruce Springsteen and Steven Van Zandt fall into that second category. Their connection, it wasn't about fame or contacts or convenience. It's a brotherhood, a soul tie, okay? A music marriage forged in sweat, like late night rehearsals, shared dreams, and the kind of loyalty that can only be built through decades of surviving life and industry side by side. Now, Steven Van Zandt didn't enter Bruce's life as a hired hand or a label suggestion. He walked into Bruce's orbit as a reflection, someone who shared the same roots, the same Jersey grit, the same hunger, the same obsessive reverence for the old soul records and rock and roll traditions that shaped an entire generation. Before they stood on global stages, they stood on boardwalks and in dim clubs, listening to the same records, absorbing the same influences, and, dreaming the same wild, impossible dreams. They didn't meet as strangers. They recognized each other instantly. So Bruce has always said that Stevie wasn't just a guitarist. He was the soul of the E Street Band. And if you watch their dynamic closely, you see why. Bruce is the engine, the storyteller, the poet, and the vision. Stevie is the wiring, the arranger, the historian, the cultural memory, the man who takes Bruce's ideas and helps shape them into something bigger, tighter, richer. Their synergy is so natural, it feels ancestral. Like they've been playing together across lifetimes, pardon me. And I have to say, I understand what that feels like. I do. I may have to start calling Big Jack Bruce. Anyway, to get back to that, they really have been playing with each other across timelines. And here's the secret people outside the hardcore fan base don't always know. Steven Van Zandt has one of the greatest musical minds of his generation. His ear for arrangement, harmony, and song structure, it's unmatched. He hears things other people miss. Bruce has openly said that Stevie saved him from creative dead ends, lifted songs from good to unforgettable, and helped define the signature E Street sound. They sharpened each other the way Bowie and Mick sharpened each other too. You get it? Iron sharpening iron. Not through competition, but through mutual evolution. That's what we do here too. Grow and glow. Now, their early club days were pure chaos. Tiny stages, borrowed gear, crowds that were half drunk, fully broke, or not paying attention at all. But that era forged their chemistry. Stevie brought humor, fire, bold options, and the unmistakable Jersey attitude. Bruce brought poetry, discipline, and a hunger to create something meaningful. Together, they created something neither could have built alone. A sound that felt like hope pinned to a guitar string. And by the time the Born to Run era hit, Bruce and Steven had developed a kind of psychic connection on stage. When Bruce leaned forward, Stevie leaned back. When Bruce pushed, Stevie anchored. When Bruce needed punch, Stevie gave him swagger. And when Bruce needed vulnerability, Stevie steadied the moment. They weren't just bandmates, they were mirrors. And their partnership didn't stop at music. Steven Van Zandt is a fierce political activist and a man who uses art as a weapon for justice. Bruce has always been drawn to that fire. Together, they stood against apartheid with the Sun City Project. They stood for workers, for voices without platforms, for communities overlooked by the spotlight. They didn't do it because it was trendy. They did it because it was right. Their activism wasn't branding, it was identity. When Stevie left the E Street Band in the 80s, it wasn't a breakup. It was a necessary departure for his own creative path. He became a producer, a composer, an actor, and a cultural icon in his own right. But even during the years apart, the brotherhood never broke. They stay connected, they stay aligned, and they stay brothers. And when Stevie returned to the E Street Band decades later, it wasn't a comeback, it was a restoration. The band snapped back into place like a puzzle piece that was always missing, So, wow, Stephen Van Zandt, he's been a big part, hadn't he? A very big part of the E Street Band and Bruce Springsteen. And I mean, it's just incredible to see what a chain link this really is. It's a big, huge chain. We're an hour and 20 minutes into it. But listen, we bring your entire chain home with the final reflection. Tying Mick, Bowie, Cher, Darlene, Bruce, and Stevie into one lineage of influence, evolution, and artistic fire. Today we didn't just walk through 6 artists, okay? We walked through 6 eras of music history, each one leaving fingerprints on the next, each one shaping the sound, the spirit, and the courage of the artists who followed. Now, this entire chain from Mick Jagger to Stephen Van Zandt is proof that music isn't created in isolation, okay? It's inherited. It's proof. Sorry, I was going to sneeze. So it's passed down like a torch. Okay. Sometimes it's obvious. Sometimes it's subtle, but the line is always there if you know where to look. Now, Mick Jagger began our journey not merely as a rock star, but as an architect of modern stage presence. He gave rock and roll its movement, its swagger, its defiance, right? Its physical vocabulary. He transformed the front man from a singer to a force. And then all the way to, Van Zandt. Bruce taught rock to be honest. Stevie taught rock to remember. And together they tell a story that stretches across decades. A story about courage and reinvention and survival and truth. And don't all of our artists today do the same? I think they do. Music just doesn't just evolve, it inherits. And today we followed the inheritance. And before I wrap up, I want to take a moment to thank the community, celebrate the wins, and remind everyone where to find the next piece of this journey, because this chain may have ended today, but the music never does, right? So, pardon me. And before I close out, let me take a minute to honor the people and the places that make all of this possible, okay? I would never walk away without doing that. The shows, the community, the entire BBT network, and the iron sharpening iron universe. That keeps us glowing day after day, because this isn't just a live stream. This is a growing family, a classroom, a front porch, a concert hall, a sanctuary, even a reunion, all wrapped up into one. First up, Ask a Bee. Every weekday, we sit down, we breathe for a minute, and we talk through life. The funny letters, the real letters, the trivia, the stories, the breakthroughs, the belly laughs, the tears, the wisdom, the foolishness, the healing, all of it, all of it. We've been picking up momentum because you keep showing up with the kind of heart only this community brings. If you need a space that feeds your soul and your funny bone at the same time, you already know where to find us every day at noon. And then we've got Ladies Diary, my heart project, my monthly sit down with the women of our world who bring strength, humor, honesty, grit, softness, wisdom, and real life lived experiences to my table. It's not a show, it's a panel of power. It's where we unpack what womanhood looks like, okay, in real time. Not the Instagram version, not the curated version, but the truth, okay? Nothing but the truth here. Transparency total. So mark your calendars because the next episode is coming very soon and you're going to want to be in the room. December 3rd, 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Central. Y'all be there. It's going to be amazing. And now I want to talk a little bit about the Iron Sharpening Iron universe real quick. We got the Gentleman's Journal. We got We Be Jammin', Coach's Corner, all of these wonderful, wonderful spinoffs. And Big Jack, Walt Talks, Mama Lions, myself, the whole crew. These shows are changing lives with encouragement, growth, humor, discipline, and that growing glow together spirit that this community was built on. When we collaborate, we cross-pollinate these shows. When we show up for each other, that is how we build a universe. And best believe this universe is expanding, okay? If you want to send in letters for Ask a Bee, for Ladies Diary, for Circle Back Saturday, or for any of the Iron Sharpening Iron universe spinoffs, the ticker, it's running down there, okay? Got all three emails. Doesn't matter what you want. Just get them in here, okay? Look, your stories matter here. Your questions, your voice, it all matters here. Don't forget to check out our merch either, okay? Lots of it. Beautiful, beautiful shirts. We got some great mugs out there. Y'all got to get to it, okay? That is also, I think, in... let me see which one. Yep. That one is in there too. You can get your merch. The link is there. In fact, you know what? While I'm just sitting here doing nothing, right? Okay, hold up. Because I'm going to get you this. And I'm going to put it in the chat so we can all get our merch, right? Not until I find it, of course. Y'all forgive me. I'm tired. Yesterday was a long day and I didn't even have to cook. I really hope that you all had a very, very good happy Thanksgiving. I know mine was pretty good. I would have liked to see my kids a little bit more, but you know what? They got lives and that's okay too. I got to talk to them at the very least. So, all righty, here it is. Finally, I'm sorry I was so slow about that, but I shall fix that now. I'm sorry. Okay, here you go. Get your merch. Get your merch. Get your merch. It's awesome. Get your merch. We got some great shirts. Look, I got mine. See? Great shirts. Okay, don't forget to check it out. New designs are finally up. We're getting all kinds of stuff going, you know. And of course, tomorrow is Circle Back Saturday. We take the week, we rewind, we reflect, we laugh at what we survived. You know, we celebrate at what we accomplished. And that's a lot. Tomorrow will be the last day of a full month of Ask a Bee. Y'all, I'm a happy camper. I feel good up on stage now. I feel like I'm actually making a difference. I'm receiving emails that actually feel like I'm making a difference. So, y'all, this is great. I'm loving this. I'm enjoying everything about it. And let's go Iron Sharpening Iron universe at the beginning of the year. Yes! I am so excited about that part, okay? So listen, last but not least, I want to go back to this. December 3rd at 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Central. December's edition of the Ladies Diary. We are celebrating Human Rights Month. Okay, ladies? Women's emotional rights. Being heard, not silenced, and your self-worth. Ladies, you have the right to feel without being labeled dramatic. And you absolutely have the right to speak without being dismissed. Setting boundaries without guilt. You absolutely also have the right to be supported and not drained, or be safe emotionally, not just physically. Okay? Let's close this thing the way we always do. with gratitude, with joy, and with the reminder that the music lives on after the stream ends. Okay. And that, my friends, is where we land the plane today. I don't know why I keep saying tonight. We walked through eras, we walked through legends, we walked through lineage, and we walked through the fire these artists carried from one generation to the next. And if there's one thing I hope you felt along the way, it's this: music is not just something we listen to, it's something we live through. Okay. These stories, Mick, Bowie, Cher, Darlene, Bruce, Stevie, they aren't just names in the history books. They're reminders that reinvention is possible, that courage is contagious, that creativity is eternal, and that even in the hardest seasons of life, something beautiful can still rise from the noise. So wherever you're sitting at right now, at home, at work, driving, cooking, please don't be driving and on the phone, but listen, folding laundry, or just hanging out with us in this beautiful community. Thank you. From the bottom of my heart, thank you. Thank you for showing up today. Thank you for letting us be a part of your Friday. Thank you for making this channel feel like a living room and a concert stage at the same time. And hear me when I tell you this: whatever you're going through, whatever you're carrying, whatever it is that you're trying to build or create or fix, maybe leave behind or move forward, you're not doing it alone. You've got a community behind you every time you show up here, a family in front of you every time you show up here, and a future that's bigger than you think. Today was a celebration. Tomorrow is a Circle Back Saturday. And next week, we start a whole new chapter in Ask a Bee, okay? In Ladies' Diary, and in the Iron Sharpening Iron universe, and in every single thing that we're building right here. So take a breath, take a bow, take a moment to be proud of yourself, please, for being here, for supporting, for learning, and for laughing, for growing. Because today, it wasn't just music history, it was momentum, and we are carrying that momentum forward together. From BBTV and Iron Sharpening Iron Universe to your home, I love you all. I appreciate you all. And I always, and as always, stay kind, stay curious, speak right, stay brave, and keep your soul tuned into the good stuff. I'll see you guys tomorrow. See you later. Love you guys. Bye-bye.